Okay, so this is actually one of my favorite lessons to teach. Let me sort of begin it with leaving you with a question. So, you've gone out for dinner or you're at a dinner party and you've eaten, three-course meal, you've really enjoyed yourself, and you are sitting there and you sort of want to undo the button of your pants or something. You're like really feeling nice and full. I'm sure we've all enjoyed this maybe at like a Thanksgiving or Christmas or something. And someone sort of nudges you the plate. They're like, oh, just have that last steak or that last chicken or whatever. And you're like, no ways, can't do it, not going to happen. And then you wait like a few minutes and then they clear up the table. And then out comes the host with this massive dessert. And you can't help yourself. And you have some dessert. Even though you've achieved satiety, you want to put some of that dessert in your face. Right? So internal and external feedback mechanisms. An example of an internal feedback mechanism is going to be satiety is one of them. Water. So because obviously we've been drinking water, have a relationship with water for eons. Right. If you go out on a Friday night and you drink, depending on your size, when I used to drink, I could drink whatever, 10 beers in an hour, maybe a little bit over an hour. And I know that like we can talk about the excess of that at a different time, but the capability was there that I could just probably drink one beer every 10 minutes and not really be too bothered by it. If at some point I sat you down and you drank 8 beers and then I gave you the same volume in water, you would really, really struggle to fulfill that in the same amount of time. The H2O internal feedback mechanisms would kick in and say, we're hydrated, no more needed. So if we bring that over to, and the same thing would happen for cola and pretty much all the sort of anything that hasn't been around for that long, so carbohydrates is included in that. So if I put you at a table and there was just meat on the table and I said, eat until you don't want to eat anymore, and you ate whatever the amount is for you, you would feel full for hours afterwards, right? And if I sort of nudged you to try and eat some more, you'd be like, no, it's almost like if you eat meat for long enough, even in your mouth, it switches off. The flavor switches off. It's like you start to eat it and it's not even tasting nice anymore. It's impossible to force yourself to carry on eating it. It loses flavor, right? Which is really everything within your body. All the signaling just switches off. But if I put French fries in front of you, I mean, it could be broccoli, it could be whatever. But this sort of argument is hard to push with broccoli because most people are like, I'm not gonna eat bucket loads of broccoli. It's just not gonna happen unless you have an affinity for it. But if I said to you French fries, right, or cake or something like that, and I put down, you sat at a table of that, you would, and you've probably experienced this, you would eat it until you felt full, but you would carry on picking. You'd carry on picking. Maybe every few minutes you'd be like, I'll try that one. I'll try that one. I'll try that one. And maybe you don't do that, and you manage to, through willpower, stop yourself there. Within 40 minutes to an hour and a half later, you're going to be hungry again. Right? And this really reinforces this idea of internal feedback mechanisms. So now, if you understand that we have very low internal feedback mechanisms for certain items in the modern diet, then that's quite empowering. But just to take this even a step further, what are examples of external feedback mechanisms? So if we bring it back to the alcohol example, right? Obviously, humans started to realize that they get themselves in trouble with alcohol, and granted, it lowers your inhibitions, and that is a factor and that sort of thing. But we had to invent, so there's the proof on the label, we had to figure out like how much alcohol is in it, and then we had to come back with a guideline that said 5 units a day is fine, or 5 units a week is fine, and this is an external feedback mechanism. We are trying to externally tell people how much they are supposed to consume of this thing because they are unable to manage that internally for themselves, right? So if the entire, as I was saying in the previous lesson, the entire nutrition realm, modern nutrition science, all of it is all to try and manage this dysregulated sort of relationship with carbohydrates, this non-essential item that we have very low internal feedback mechanisms for. And yes, we can eat vegetables for nutrition and what have you, but the fact remains is that people are not choosing to eat vegetables, they're eating junk. right? So that's not an argument really. We don't have feedback mechanisms for whether it's broccoli or cake or bread or whatever it is. So the nutrition model that's been built out, the complexity that's been created is like, okay, well, we're going to figure out the science and the calories, and we're going to put nutrition labels on things, and then we're going to give people calorie counters or meal plans. Or I remember one of the nutrition qualifications I did used to use a hand model. So a piece of protein was the size of the palm of your hand. A portion of veg was the same as a fist of your hand. A portion of fat was the thumb. And then you'd get a little sheet that says, have 4 hands of protein a day, have this many fists of vegetables and fruit and whatever. And it's all externally me trying to tell you how much you're supposed to eat, or you trying to tell yourself how much you're supposed to eat. And again, this is one of those things that once you see it, you can't unsee it, right? That we evolved this beautiful system to manage internally how to fulfill that nutritional quota. But then we, over the last few thousand years, ended up in this position where we have pushed ourselves into this really stressed system. And then because of all the complications and symptoms that we're facing from this stressed system, we are now trying to micromanage it with all these external feedback mechanisms, like trying to, tell an alcoholic that he needs to find moderation. Or it's absolutely bonkers. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. I hope that this further ahas for you, and that you are starting to realize that when it comes to nutrition, trying to learn more about the complexity of nutritional science is not necessary, right? You probably thought going through this course, can't he explain to me what protein is, and amino acids and lipids and glycogen and glucose and and all of these sort of things. There's tons and tons of courses out there that you can learn that. That's not what I want to teach you, and I don't believe that it is necessary when you are trying to build an empowering relationship with food. The complexity that exists these days is completely not needed. And I spent years and years and years through all of those various different models trying to figure out what the magic key was, or the game changer was going to be. And really, it has been within me all along. So moving forward, I really want you to spend some time with understanding that, like, okay, I need to eat as close to my ancestors as possible. That's going to get very boring fast. How do I figure out how to have a relationship with this thing that I have low feedback mechanisms for? Maybe it incorporates me just eating low net carb, fresh items as often as I can, and in as much variety as I can next to my meat, in order to build out some variety and lifestyle enjoyment. And then every now and then playing around with novelty. And depending on what my goals are, how much of those things I will have on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. And, as we get further in the lessons, this sort of ecosystem, this picture is going to build out for you. But hopefully right now, as you're sitting there, you're starting to have this massive aha moment that, like, the way to eat optimally is very simple. And where the sort of challenge comes in is in trying to figure out how messy I want to get with eating for pleasure, trying to, nobody gets themselves in trouble eating vegetables. It is no problem. But the problem is that nobody is choosing vegetables over donuts. So for me to say to you here that you need to eat more vegetables is also an external feedback mechanism, me trying to tell you how to be healthy, right? I just want to give you this information so that you can start to realize that, like, maybe the reason why you're not being able to make that choice between donuts and vegetables is firstly probably because the satiety is not achieved, the ancestral diet is not being fulfilled. And then if you fulfill that, how come you're still struggling? And that's what we're going to cover in some later lessons.